Hello and welcome again to the Campfire Project. And today I have with me, first of all, Evan Money from America. Evan, please introduce yourself. Tell people a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you so much, Alan. Excited to be here. I am a self-diagnosed ADD visionary and very low energy. And people often ask, man, are you like that all the time? And it's like, absolutely. So that's just me, high energy, super all over the place, but thanks to entrepreneurship and technology, have found a way to make that work. So it's about having multiple businesses, multiple revenue streams, and focusing on a lifestyle rather than chasing money all over the place. So that's a little bit about me.
Excellent. And then we have John Hope. Welcome to the Campfire. John, how are you doing today?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I'm doing very well. I'm working with life and business strategies and working with people with helping them to develop mental health coping mechanisms to overcome adversity. Working with that at the moment.
Excellent. And then we have Jurgen Schmechel. Jurgen, welcome to the Campfire. How are you today?
Excellent, Alan. Thanks for having me. And I'm the founder of Inspiring Relationships, where I talk about the way relationships should be. Because with our divorce rates so high, I think we can do something to prevent this. And there's this typical term, if it's not broken, why fix it? That might work for your plumbing solution, but not for a relationship, because the mess of a broken relationship is much bigger than the mess of a broken water pipe. So that's where I'm coming from. I want to prevent this by coming in early and not as a counselor, but as a guide, as a coach on the sideline.
Yeah, well, as I say, with relationships, when there's finally a broken relationship, there's already a big mess that's been developing for some period of time. So
absolutely.
Well, today we've talked about what it is to be a man. We've talked about relationships with our partners. We've talked about, in today's one that went out early this morning, talked about father and their relationships with their daughters and sons and what it is to be a father and all the rest of the things that we go through. But one of the things is getting more back to the personal side with the individuals again and looking at talk about this positive masculine energy, how to develop that and what that's really all about and how that sort of relates to the old typecasting we had of what our traditional roles as men and women were before we actually had this new term, positive masculine energy or masculine feminine energy. So Jurgen, you was mentioning to me earlier, you had a couple of suggestions or a couple of ideas on that. Would you like to start us off? Oh, sorry, not Jurgen. I meant Evan.
You put Jurgen on the spot here, so I got you covered, Jurgen. So to kick it off,
before in that we might make a few mistakes through this. I said, don't worry about it because I'll make the mistakes. I just proved it to you.
It's all that smoke in the background from the campfire.
That's right. Well, I can't tell the two of you apart.
There's some exertion of that male energy right there. Yeah.
So here's what I've discovered, Alan. I think a lot of you guys will chime in on this as well. But the simple truth is we've all learned how to live from somebody else. And I don't think there's any exception to that rule. And as human beings, we have to learn and keep learning from others how to live. And that was brought up to me by a famous USC professor by the name of Dallas Willard. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's right. We all learn from somebody else. And so this hyper masculine energy and all that stuff, we all learned it and picked it up from somebody else. And so who are we learning from really? And so for most of us, it's movies, it's television, it's music, and it's sports. I mean, you want to talk about hyper masculine energy. I mean, whether it's the NFL or, you want to go this side and go the rugby ball. I mean, that was like the definition of hyper masculinity. I even wore my Super Bowl ring for everybody just to kind of define that. And so it's just really interesting when I kind of looked at where we got it from. And so part of what I've discovered and what my bride and I do and our role in now at this stage in our life is teaching others through a healthy marriage that, hey, there's a different way to create that happily ever after. So that we actually have a new reality show coming up called Happily Ever After, because my bride and I are best known for getting remarried in a different state or country every year. So guys, check this out. I've been married 24 times. That means I've had 24 honeymoons. Yes! And the sex is actually fantastic. So that was never modeled to me. I didn't know that was an option. Everything that was modeled to me through movies, television, music, sports, all I saw was you could be, single and cynical, you could be divorced and desperate, or you could be married and miserable. So those are the only examples that I saw. And no wonder people try to escape with drugs and alcohol and porn and everything else. It was like, that was the same road I was going, but I was like, there's gotta be a better way. And it wasn't until I went to a personal development seminar and one of the speakers was sharing about an author who said, hey, there's this famous author, and I won't throw him under the bus. There's a famous author who every year on his anniversary, he throws a party and he and his wife get married again. And I was like, you can do that? Really? So again, it's learning from somebody else. This guy was just telling me about a story from somebody else. And that was like, just shifted everything. My bride looked at me. She's like, I want to do that, except I want to get remarried in a different state or country. Now, for most of you watching this, you guys have money and you're successful. It's no big deal. At that time, we had zero money. And I'm like, well, I want to do it, but how's this going to work? But we figured out how to get around that and really how to do low budget weddings. and put it all together. And so what was so interesting is when we made that first commitment to say, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to get remarried in a different state or country. I was planning, now you guys are international, so this may or may not land, but in Los Angeles, Tijuana, Mexico is a couple hours away. And that Tijuana, Mexico, no offense to those in Mexico, but Tijuana, Mexico is known for doing things cheaply. That is like what it's known for. That is like, it's cheap, it's small, it's dirty. That's kind of what it is on the map. So that was my idea. Like, hey, we can go to Tijuana and drive over there, it'll be cheap. But that same year, we actually won a trip to Paris, France, and our first remarriage was in the Palace of Versailles. And so from one idea to hearing somebody about a different way to live, it was like, wow. So I want to kind of kick this discussion off of about, where did we learn how to live? Where did we learn what masculine energy was and how we saw it in a healthy and a non-healthy way? And then who really defines it, right? Mm. So that's kind of my experience. I wanted to kick it off with that.
Well, in my case, it was watching TV shows because my father died when I was young. So the men around me were really what I saw on the screen. How about you, John? What was your input to first into masculinity?
Well, I grew up also from a broken family. I saw my father, who was a masculine man, only in school holidays, and in that time he was working 12 to 15 hours a day. So I didn't get to see much of him. My mother, well, there were some issues there with alcoholism and I'd say anger management. But so I don't know. I probably, like you said, Alan, you pick a lot of the stuff up as you go. And as you said, even coaching or learning, it's a big thing. And I think the responsibility is parents to teach kids, not rely on the school system, but to teach them from a position of ethics and morals and that sort of thing is very important and not there today. And as you also said, there's a lot of broken families. Jurgen, did I get it right?
Yep.
And I totally agree with that and relate to that because when that partnership breaks down, the learning of the kids breaks down. I think parent is Latin for teacher or something along those lines. And your biggest teacher in life is your parents.
Yeah.
And they really need to like kids learn what they live. So you've got to provide the right atmosphere for those kids to develop in a positive way, and you can't not practice what you preach because kids pick up on that. And the minute a relationship breaks down, it does have disastrous effects. And then you in our society, women usually get the kids, and males in particular need a male role model. And a lot of the time they don't.
We've lost you there, John. We can't hear you.
John, come back. It was just getting good.
John.
Can't hear you, John. The voice has just dropped off.
No, I'll pick up where John left off, because it was ringing so many bells for me, guys. But here's what I discovered is that men, and I think Alan, I think you shared this as well. Yeah, this was you, Alan. You were sharing how women can only raise boys; they can't raise men.
That's it. Same as men can't raise girls into womanhood. We're just
yeah. And so I think for most of us on this call and most of us watching, our parental example was what not to do. So loud and clear, right? Like, okay, I don't want to do that, but where do I find, and it was interesting, you mentioned, TV, that was your like role of television, but then you find out that's fiction. And you're like, and then in today's world, we got reality TV, but there's nothing real about reality TV. So all this stuff we're learning is like, well, wait a minute, that's not even real, right? It's like,
Yeah, we'll just do a quick sound check with John. Can you hear us there, John? No, it looks like it's having technical problems. There's so many issues when you're on the internet these days.
Okay.
But, Jurgen, in your particular case, what was it like growing up for you? What was your role? What was your first understanding of manhood?
Yeah. So I wanted to chime in on the things Evan and John were mentioning before, because I think
Evan, there you are.
Yeah.
You're back, John?
Sorry about that. I have no idea what happened, but
no worries.
Good to have you back.
Yeah. So Evan, you've mentioned the role models, but I think you've missed out the parents, to name the parents as the first one, because before you even start to watch television at the age of 6 or 7, you have the role model for the first couple of years, and that's, as we all know, is the phase where the kids take it in as face value. So there is no critical faculty. So whatever they experience at that age is essential for their development. So I had the luck to grow up in a very harmonic household. So my parents, I've never seen them fight. I've never seen them arguing. Maybe they did behind closed doors, but I don't even think they did. So for me, I've been taught respect between genders from early ages on, and that's one of the biggest things which I try to give on to my clients, that I think actually respect is more important than love, because if you don't have the respect for yourself, how can you respect the other person? And so respect comes first. But also to even extend on what John was saying in terms of if the marriage breaks down, what the effect is. Imagine a 12-year-old girl and the father walks out. She's losing, first of all, a role model in terms of, or an anchor in her life. But now 10 years later, when she's then first time in love, how can she relate to a man not thinking he will walk out on me anytime soon? So they actually lose twice, these kids, and not just girls, boys even more. And so I think we need to acknowledge that our society is in deep trouble in terms of how masculinity and femininity can work together.
Yeah, because I always understood the role of the man was, well, as far as the son goes, he's going to be his first hero. And for the daughter, that's always going to be her first love. And I know Freud talked about, and a lot of people, I think, have taken Freud out of context. I don't think it was just sexual stuff. It's that connection that we have, because we don't actually have as you said, we don't have the faculties at a very young age to reason all this out. So we learn by watching, not so much by listening.
Absolutely.
So it's not processing what's in they've actually said. So the girl's going to look at dad and go, well, that's the sort of man that I can expect. This is what men are like. So this is what I'm likely to expect. And as you said, dad walks out, broken marriage or whatever, and they're expecting that to happen when they get older as well. And the boys will look at dad and they'll be their first hero. So if dad's never at home and all the rest of it, what are they learning? Well, when you grow up and you're married and everything else, you have to do the same thing to be a man. If dad was a man, the only way I can be a man is by doing that as well. So we create things. And so the energy, we're talking about positive masculine energy. I've heard people talk about positive and negative masculine energy, positive and negative feminine energy, and not so much that it's around the sexes, it's the the energy that's in all of us. So men can have both positive, well, we do have positive and negative masculine and feminine energy, the same as women have that as well. But it's how do we actually change that? Because one of the things that Adrian Hankett sent through to me was a mention of a research document called the Man Box that was put out by the Jesuit Social Services. And it talks about being in the man box was that old idea of what men were supposed to be. Did you fit into that? Were you tough? If somebody pushed you, did you stand up and fight back and all those sort of things? And when they asked people that were actually functioning within the box compared to those that are outside the box, the thinking is completely different. And you can see the difference in the energies of the people that they've actually questioned. It's a big document. It's about 62 pages of a lot of research. But I've started looking at it today, and there's a lot of interest in there, interesting information in there. But that's the sort of thing that I think we need to look at today is, well, what should be, not just being a man, but how should we be using both the masculine and feminine energy that we have in each of us? So anybody got any views on that?
I think it's more got to be around what your ethics and morals and integrity are. I think, you know, everyone comes from a different place. You know, and you've got to understand what your ethics, morals are. Like you've got to create those boundaries for yourself. And a lot of people don't. A lot of people have been guided by people that don't. And you know, like Jurgen said, you know, when the relationship breaks down and they don't have the positive influence from either side of the family, it becomes negative because they all get caught up in the fight. Like I had 20 years ago in the police where dealing with domestics all the time. And I'd say countless times, you know, they'd say, the bloke would say, I'm just going to leave. The woman would say, I'm just going to leave. I'd have to talk to them again. I'd go, mate, you got kids. You got a business arrangement. You got to talk to that person forever. So you need to find a common ground there. And I think, like Jurgen was saying, there's not enough emphasis put on people staying together. And as you were alluding with the girl, when the girl leaves, like the person leaves when she's 12, yeah, it does. It shows, well, how can I trust this person? You know, like I trusted my dad. Look what he did. You know, and there's no education around that at all.
No,
there's none at all. So yeah, there's a big need for it. So I think there is masculine and feminine energy. Everyone's going to do it different.
Yeah. No, one thing that jumped out, John, to me, just watching it recently, and you mentioned it earlier off air about your son getting into American football.
Yeah.
Is there's actually in the NFL, there is now a female referee. And so she's the first ever, and she's been doing it for a couple of years, but they just showed her at this big playoff game. It was so interesting because you talk about, okay, typically if you think, okay, this woman's going to be a referee in an all-male world, right, with the behavior level and the language level, right? I mean, this is hyper masculinity, quote unquote, right, on the football field, in the field of battle per se. But it was so interesting. They did a close up on her, and yet she had makeup on. She had lipstick on. She had a little eye thing. I mean, she wasn't glammed out, but she looked. She was very feminine looking, and she had her hair up in the hat, but she was all business. It wasn't like, oh, we just got to get this token woman. I mean, obviously she wanted to be there. So what you said, John, was so profound because it was, hey, how do I want to build it? And so for her, it's like, hey, I'm feminine, but at the same time, I love being in this world. No doubt she probably had like 8 brothers, right? And so she just feels at home there. So it's just a great example of like, hey, here's that harmony of male and female energy. Because she's all female, but she's in this world and still in her feminine energy, but at the same time, not taking any flack from these players. It was really interesting to see. And so I think watching things like that, right? Where do we learn it from? Even in sports, right? It's like, oh, wow, gosh, maybe you can do that. Interesting. So I just, that you brought that to my mind, John. So I'm going to drop that in real quick.
I totally agree. In the police, they wanted to bring in more women than men because it was mainly a male-dominated thing. And what they found that women argue better than men. Now, when you're in the police, you turn up it's an argument every time you turn up. They argue better. We want to punch and throw things. Yeah. They can argue. Yeah. And they make better police.
Oh yeah.
Much better. They're much better in violent situations. The problem that happens is when they have kids, there's some sort of chemical thing that changes the way they look at the world because, you know, they go to that paternal, mothering, loving sort of thing and that makes them realise how bad, you know, what they've already experienced and become protective, and that can cause an issue. But mate, we've got referees, female referees over here in our rugby league, and mate, I reckon they do a better job because there's no bullshit with them. They just tell them.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't like what I say? Get off. And how do you argue with that?
And just look at politics. There are some female leaders out there who are really making a difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So on that, just thinking about the quota business they're talking about now, by having, so many, you have so many women, you've got to have so many different ethnic groups, etc., in the organisation. Do you see that working in favour of that, or is it going to bring in issues?
That's the worst in America, with my terrible accent. That's called affirmative action, and it started with skin color, which is the most toxic thing ever, because per you, Alan, and like you talked about, hey, this male and female, it's not me too, you two, it's us. So a long-time Academy Award winner taught me this about famous actor, I'm trying to remember, Louis Gossett Jr. He dropped this line I've been carrying ever since, is that there's only one race. It's the human race. Yeah, and so if you literally come out and say, oh, I got to hire you because you're this color, it's like you just defeated everything that Martin Luther King built upon, of this whole color game. And I help people and, I teach a lot about that, about not playing the color game. But then when you start playing the gender game, it's just like, it's like, just hire the best person for the job, right? Like the NFL's figuring out, you know what? I think these female referees are actually better. But who cares? We want to hire the best person. And what I love about going back to hypermasculinity and athletics, and I want to hear what you other guys have to say, but early on in the college world, Gators, go Gators and all that, John. In the 50s, right? And I don't know where Australia was and Germany was, but in the 50s, there was a huge color barrier. And if you had a certain color skin, you couldn't play football. But because the coaches wanted to win no matter what, they finally were like, I don't care what color you are. You can run fast. You can catch the ball. You get on this team. And so it wasn't about a affirmative action. It wasn't mandated, right? You have to have so many players of this color on your team. It was about winning. It was about, hey, I want to win. I want the best athlete. And I don't care what color skin you are. You're good. Come on this team. So whenever you try to administrate that, and I'll go back to classic Ronald Reagan, government is not the solution. It's the problem. We are the solution. The Campfire, this is part of the solution. People talking about it and going, gosh, if you take away the restraints and just let people hire the best person for that particular job and leave them alone, guess what? If they're not mandated with all, they can go find the best person, and they'll cross color barriers, and they'll cross gender barriers, they'll cross whatever barriers if they want to win. And in a company, it's, hey, I want a bigger market share. I want a better, stock price. We got to hire that person. And then Alan, we can go back per you, and because we're picking on you, you see it with age as well, right? Like, oh, we don't want that guy. He's too old. It's like, hey, I'll take all the old guys because I know they're wise enough to get it done. So, you can go down that line as well. But yeah, for me, anytime you mandate something, you're killing the goose that lays the golden egg, basically. Yeah.
So you're hearing a lot from media these days about, they're pushing the gender stuff. First of all, it was the Me Too movement, the hashtag Me Too, which was the women trying to get in there as well. Then there've been people fighting for the Men Too movement, so bringing men in. But every time we go to a group, we're creating further separation. That's why one of the things you'll notice on the bottom of all these Campfire chats that we have, there's always the hashtag we together. So there is no, when we look at we together, that's taking in gender, it's taking in sexual preferences, it's taking in culture, it's taking in everything. Because as you said, Evan, we are a global community, we are one race.
Yeah. But if you look at the stats, women are not representative, featured neither in government nor in organizations. And so that's, if you just look at the statistics, how many women and how many men are there, you would expect that at least half of the government is female and half of the organizational leaders are female, and that's not. So obviously there is still prejudice against women. So therefore, if you ever want to change this, you need to have this kind of agenda where you're saying we need that kind of quotation to be fixed. I see where you're coming from, Evan, but at the same time, I think the reason why this is not done yet is because there is a prejudice against women.
I think what we need to be doing is looking at everybody who comes forward for a position. Yes, be looking at, because we need women's views in the areas as well. We don't just need male views in all these different areas. So we need the women's views, but we also need to make sure that those that come into the conversation or come into the group have the ability to actually do the job. So we really need to focus, first of all, on removing the biases that are stopping women getting in. Yeah. But at the same time, when we're looking at it, not just taking any woman in just because it's going to fill the listing, because we've got to have a certain percentage. And so tick that box. Okay, we're looking good. We're okay. We've got to make sure that the women coming in have got the best chance to be the best that they can in that role as well. So we've got to give them more opportunities to be able to get to that level, and then we'll be able to employ them on their actual performance. And whoever's got the greatest performance in that role will bring them in.
Yeah. And coming back to the very beginning of our discussion, that's again, we are learning by role models. So the girls in school now learn that whatever they do, they can't compete because they are not accepted in high stake places. So why even bother?
Yeah, so we've got to change that attitude. They've got to let them know there's a path for them to advance. Absolutely. But we have to also make sure that it's a level playing field for everybody. Yeah. And the best person gets the job.
Yeah. And to be fair, it's got better over the last couple of years, but I think there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who are making the decisions around this, they're still playing lip service. It's like they need to feel that we can be seen to be doing the right thing. So we'll just open up all these positions for this particular gender or nationality, race or whatever, so that we look good on paper and everybody who's looking at us will vote for us again.
Yeah, but here's the cool thing about as a Milton Friedman and entrepreneurship and how the whole mindset of a free economy comes in. So a lot of the women that are not getting those positions, a lot of them start their own companies. Yeah, and are able now. There's a huge shift. Because I see it in a lot of different industries, especially the fashion industry. I see a lot of women starting their own companies, and now there's a new brand of clothes where, in the old model, it was the sweatshop, right? Where we're just going to chain them to the sewing machine and get them going. So this woman started a company where she actually has the seamstresses that make the t-shirts and sew the clothes sign the label. And so she is now changing the whole shift of fashion in that world where people want to know, hey, where's this shirt coming from? It started with food, right? Where's this food coming from? Now it's like, where's this shirt coming from? And she's able to create a business model of where, hey, people will pay more for her clothes because it's sustainable and I'm empowering women. And here's the greatest scorecard, Jurgen. And for me, it's not legislation, it's this. Yeah. Because that's what we vote with. We vote with money. Yeah. Like you were saying, Alan, we pay lip service all day long, but where's the money going, right? Let's follow the money. That's so it. When there's money, there's instant mind shift change. It's like, ooh, that's profitable. Oh, I want to get over there. So there's a groundswell of this movement. And then, of course, using the U.S. as a perfect example. I mean, the U.S. was this close to, first we broke the color barrier, right, with Barack Obama. And then we were this close to bringing in a female president. So the gates are wide open, and there's a groundswell that you can't really see, but it's going to be a tidal wave very soon. And the old world, I think, just like the Berlin Wall, is going to crumble. The Berlin Wall didn't crumble under a governmental movement. It was a societal movement. And so I think just talking about it and sharing about bringing that things to life, that surfaces and caused the real action. Same with Martin Luther King. That was not government mandated. That was people mandated. So when enough of that rises up, and going back to the beginning, right? Hey, look, there's a female referee there. You don't have to say anything, right? Every gal is like, whoa, gosh, that wasn't around before. Oh, wow, gosh, that, wow, look at that. So I think there is a lot of hope in that area. And to your point, Jurgen, yes, I think there is a possibility of some legislation easing that, but I think a lot of it comes from the people side and the examples.
Yep.
And, there's one classic, women, right? The women, when look at entertainment, look at music, right? It's the women are the ones making the big money, the Beyoncés and all these people, and you can name all your great female artists. But in those areas, it's like, well, wait, the women are making more. It's like, hey, we need more men pop superstars, to come around. So it's interesting to look at that side of things.
I think the women have already got a pretty good stage. I've, like when I was first joined the police back in, what was it, 1989, I wanted to be a dog handler. I wanted to be with the dog. The only people that they weren't going to deal with in the next 15 years was white Anglo-Saxon males. They wanted females, they wanted any other ethnic race, but they didn't want me. So the legislation for here, like I'm only talking from what I've been exposed to, is already there. And you look at female entrepreneurs, like I just was in LA where we met Jessica Simpson. She's a billionaire in companies. She's not, like, putting all her stuff that she's achieved as a singer and an actress aside, she was like, she's huge. Oprah Winfrey, they told her she could never do what she was doing and she killed it. So that challenge is there. I think you've got to more look at a victim mentality of individuals, not minority groups, but just people individually. Like, so many people want to play a victim card, and no one wins coming from as a victim. And that goes back to talking about coping mechanisms, because it's a lack of coping mechanisms that make you a victim, which is what Jurgen talked about. So, I think we've got to go back to basics. I think all the stuff about sex and race and all that, it's already been dealt with. It's already there. The legislation's there. No one's being held back because of colour, creed, sex. That's already there. I think we've got to go back to ethics and morals, get rid of the victim mentality, and teach people success principles, which, as Jurgen sort of said, with that, the main part where that takes away is the breakdown of the family unit, because your mental strategies, that's where you learn them. I think we maybe need to focus more on education of that, so that we can teach our kids to be strong, independent, and how to achieve, not how to whinge because they didn't come first. It's okay not to come first. It's just not okay to try. I don't like the word try, to do. For me, try is attempt and fail. It's a failure word. You either do it or you don't do it. If you don't come first, you don't have to come first. You just got to do the best you can.
That you get a trophy for actually having achieved. They do give away best and fairest. Person who's tried the hardest, the greatest improves. They got to, they put all that work in, and then somebody else just gets a trophy for turning up. That causes animosity and things. You go, well, why do I bother? So it breaks down a desire to actually apply. By having quotas and having, well, we've got to have this number, we're focusing on the number. We're not focusing on developing our relationships and helping women to actually come through. But we've got to help ourselves first as men, but get that masculinity right. So we're not in that, abusive one that's trying to put women down. Because when we set up quotas, the way I feel, I've been around groups where I feel very close to them, but then I'll hear them complaining about, the white man. And I go, well, I'm a white man. And if I hear that, if I hear that all the time, you want to actually pull back. So by having quotas and making it easy for people to complain about this and that, then the end result is we actually cause greater separations. I think you and I, John, were talking earlier, and you mentioned about, what was it now, where that exactly happened.
When I had one of the people, Aboriginal people, come to my house.
Yeah, and and that side of it, where that was the assumptions and everything else, and how it really break down the connections. Whereas it should be that we're helping people to actually become the best they can be, starting with children. It's got to be started at that level. By the time they're 5 years old, we're really past it.
When I said that, though, this person wasn't whinging.
No, he wasn't.
Victim. I think the victim is the problem. If you're being a victim, we've got a saying that the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Well, that's fine. You've got to stand up and stick up for yourself, but don't come from a place of being a victim. You know, you've, you know, if you want to get something, you want to get what you're worth, and go out and get it. You know, don't whinge because someone else has done it before you.
Yeah.
You know, like we are all different.
Yeah, as you explained to me when he came through the door, he had his belief of what it was, but as in his dealings with you, it broke down those paradigms.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All of a sudden, started to see things completely differently, and found that connection with you.
Yeah,
and
but it also opened my eyes up because I saw that he has had to deal with that, and he this was out of Burke, and it was just to put you in the picture. I had someone I worked with in the police. He wasn't a policeman, but he worked with us. Came to my house. I said, let's just come over for we had half an hour to get something to eat. We got a hamburger. I said, don't worry about getting the soft drink. Come to my house. He wanted to take his shoes off. I mean, he didn't want to come, and I said, don't do that because it was a police house. It's dirty. I wouldn't walk barefoot in there. You wear shoes. And he didn't want to come in. He's never been in a white person's house before. And I was sort of taken back by that. He came in. I went to give him a drink, and he was amazed that I was going to let him drink out of the same cup as I did. Now, I didn't understand that. I don't have racist or sexist sort of opinions, but it sort of opened my eyes up as to what he had to endure growing up. And then I saw that stuff, you know, in that small country town of Burke, and I was just amazed. And I can't comprehend having to live like that or grow up like that. And I understand that there's problems and rules in place, and I believe as a society we've got that. But I think he wasn't a victim. You know, he never came across as a victim. But he did come across as, this is unsure. Like I'm not used to this. But it's when they come across as a victim, whinging, complaining. Well, you know, we've got a society that that caters to that. I think we need to address that. You know, it's okay to have an opinion, but when you start whinging and keep whinging and you learn to chuck a tantrum to get your own way, well, we try to stop our kids doing that. You know, adults, ridiculous. That's my opinion.
Jurgen, you got any thoughts on that? So,
yes. Where do we start? So that's the point I see in relationships oftentimes is that, like John, you just were saying, is that people consider themselves as a victim. So they externalize, they point at their partner and said, if only he would, or if only she could, and thereby externalizing, giving their power away to the other person and saying, well, if it wouldn't be for my partner, I would be better off or happier or whatever. And it's so difficult for them to understand that happiness is actually a choice.
Yes, absolutely.
It is their choice to be happy. So if someone is keying your car, that is not nice, but it does not need to make you unhappy. It's your state of mind, and it's your state of personality and your self-worth. If that's at the right place, even a keyed car can make you unhappy. So, but these people oftentimes, as I said, externalizing, looking at the other person and saying, oh, he's always lying to me. Hang on. So what is the quintessence of this? So why do you allow him to lie to you? So where do you have responsibility for his actions? And that's very difficult for people to understand. So when I talk to relationships, there are basically three, for each person in the relationship, there are three options or three doors to walk through. The first door is, let's stay as we are, don't do anything. So we are on a downward spiral, but all right, I can't change anything, let's go that way. The second door is actually to say, I'm walking out of this relationship, I'm divorcing. The third one is the hardest one. Stay in the relationship but change. Because here and now you need to understand that you have a responsibility and it is on you to change.
Wait, Jurgen, I don't have to change, they have to change, right?
Yeah, sure.
And that's what you hear from people so often. It's ridiculous. You know, because I've been divorced twice, and I've had a little bit of that in my own approach to things as well. So,
I've put out a relationship quiz on the internet, which I call Relationship Performance Indicator, where people can kind of self-score through 25 questions, and at the end there are some open questions, and there I allow people then to ask me questions, and the comments and questions I get there are hard. So it's devastating, because you read what people perceive and endure in their relationship, where you think, hello, how can you live with this? But people do, because walking out or changing is much harder than to stay in and, all right, he didn't mean to hit me. He just had a bad day. So they even endure violence. Did you know that every 90 seconds in Australia, a woman is sexually harassed? Every 90 seconds.
Wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. And every week, one woman dies of domestic violence in Australia.
So let me ask you guys this, because this will circle back to the beginning. I'd love to get all of your before and afters. So I'd love to know from all of you guys, growing up, what you thought healthy masculinity was, or what you just thought masculinity was, and what you think it is now, as someone all of us are willing to actually take responsibility and grow. So as men that are actually willing to grow and take responsibility, what was masculinity then and what is it now for all you guys?
Well, in my case, as I said, I grew up with John Wayne and those sort of movies. That was all I had as a male reference.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks, mate. You're lucky I put the teeth in before we started. That was what I grew up with. And there was one situation where there was a whole thing of a source of events, and I was about 23 at the time, and my wife was hysterical. It's the only time in my life I've ever slapped a woman, and the thing was, because she was hysterical, what I'd learned in the movies was slap. Just a gentle slap across the cheek, just to get the attention. And I really felt lousy when I did it. But that's what I grew up with and understood. And then at that point, I really started questioning, because it didn't feel right, but that's what I'd been taught. So my masculinity was more the rough, tough, or ideal of it was a rough, tough guy. But as through life, and having been a grandfather and raising my boys on my own, and then having the grandkids and everything else, it softens you. And I think probably the masculinity still of it, it's shifted. It's gone from being that very tough, it's got to be this way, leader of the family and everything else. Well, leaders don't just walk out and push everybody around. Leaders actually encourage, they help their people to grow. So my understanding of the masculinity, positive masculinity, went from what I thought it was before, which I realise now is more negative. It was disconnected. You were tough and everything else, but could you pick up a child? Could you pick up a flower? No. If you're a man, you don't do that sort of stuff. That's a woman's job. And but when you're raising 3 kids on your own, all that goes out the window real fast.
You're like, where's the Duke? Where'd he go?
You learn that that's what I started to appreciate, what women actually do in their role as well. I started to really appreciate them, and at the same time questioning my own masculinity. And so that's how my views changed on it. How about you guys?
So as I said, I grew up in a household where my father was provider and a real gentleman. So he opened the door for my mother. He was carrying heavy loads. He helped her into the coat, and he was paying when we were going to a restaurant. And to this day, I kind of live this kind of attitude towards my wife and towards other people in the society. Not that I'm inviting everybody for lunch, but I'm the last to step out of an elevator. I get up in a bus when there is a woman needing a seat. So and there are a lot of young blokes sitting around me looking at me like, oh, why is he getting up? Because they haven't learned that. So, and also over the time, I've studied more and more about masculinity, and I more and more understand that our psyche comes from 50,000 years ago, where we were hunters, and where we looked at pattern, and these pattern we still see in our daily lives, and we try to optimize these patterns, and that's the hardest part for a man nowadays to understand that we are, our genes come from 50,000 years of ancestors and hunting, and now we are living in a society where this is not always to our best advantage.
How about you, John?
Hey, how do we say this? Where did our masculinity come from or kick in? Did I get that right?
When did it start? You know, do you have a particular view when you started, and has that changed over time? In what direction?
Well, I grew up in a broken family, and I didn't have a grandfather. I didn't really have any male influences. I had my uncle. He was pretty good, but I suppose I was in search of it. I didn't really understand it. My grandmother was basically my nurturer. So I probably had more female role models than male. I got to about 12. I was a sarcastic, cheeky little shit of a kid that was a very fast runner. So I'd love to upset the older kids, but they couldn't catch me. My father said,
"What's changed?"
Yeah, nothing's changed. He said, "Well, sooner or later they're going to catch you. We're going to get you into martial arts." So I got into Taekwondo. I got a 4th Dan, which was as high as I could go, and I got I had an Australian title in fighting. So I learnt that, but I could also back myself up, which served me well being in the police. So it was probably, I think my father was a big advocate against violence against women, as am I. I don't think there's any need for it ever. Like if you've got someone that's like that, then it's up to you to get away from it. You know, if you can't, like as Jurgen said, work it out. Obviously, that's what you need to do. But there's sometimes when people cross the line, and once that line's crossed, sometimes there's no going back. There's no I'm sorry for some things. So I think it's a personal thing. We all start off as babies and we grow up, and we all learn at different times, different things. And like I said before, it's about getting your integrity right. Understanding who you are and what's important to you, and just make sure that integrity, all your actions are based on your integrity, your integral guidelines. So I don't know if there's masculine or there's masculine and female energy in everyone. I don't think you can just say I'm a bloke, I've got masculine energy. I'm typical alpha male. If I'm standing there with someone and there's a violent confrontation, I'm not the sort of person to back down. So if that's masculine energy, then maybe. But I've seen a lot of females do that too. So I think integrity's more where we really need to focus, because there's not really anything driven on that area. Especially in schools and things like that. And without that, you get confused because you don't know how to react in different situations. And different situations are going to happen all the time. Life comes at you, you can't stop it. So yeah, I just think you need, like as Evan said before, it's getting the right coach. If I want to learn to be a 100-meter runner, I don't go to a high jumper to find out how to do it. So find someone that's doing what you want to do in the direction that you want to do, and go and say, hey, how do I be like you? Like, what have you done to get where you are? It doesn't have to be a confrontation like that. You can just, you can, as Alan was saying before, you can pick that up off the movies. Like Alan learned to punch a woman. No, I'm only joking. but it is. I'll slap, sorry. But it's you do pick that up. There's all these influences, and as Evan said before, music influences. You deal with a lot of musicians. They're not the sort of people you want to emulate.
I need to chime in at this stage. And one thing which is really of a concern for me is the amount of porn which is watched nowadays, because the world view you see there is that men can go on for hours, which we can't, and women are happy to be dominated and open for all, can't even describe it, sorts of activities, and if that's the role model which people are watching and then taking on, like you said, Evan or Alan, we take so much in from the movies. That's a real concern for our society.
That's exactly right. So this is the thing that we watch so much stuff. There's been, somebody sent me an article the other day, which was of a woman. She was in Europe many years ago. She was a child. She was taken in by one of the sex trades and made to sit and watch videos on hour on end with her eyes propped open, watching people having sex, she had to learn to be able to look at someone's, not only their facial expressions, but also the facial features that were created in their face. She knew the men that would be more bestial towards her. She knew what the men who would more likely to masturbate, all those things. She could see that in their facial features. And so she was taught that so that she could then fulfill that role in the sex trade.
Oh, no.
Like the men biting, and she was being manipulated all the way through. When you got those sort of things going on, you can see how powerful it is in what we say and we do around each other. That impacts especially on our children, especially those that are very young.
Yep.
So, as I said before, I went from being what I thought was as a masculine man, but really it was the masculine side of the male, but then probably the negative side of the female, because the aggression and anger that would come out.
Yep.
So I'd then shift into the negative masculine energy when I realised that it was really, it's a combination of both, as you said, John. We have both male and female in us, or masculine and feminine, not male and female, but masculine and feminine energies. In a woman, you want to see that feminine side, like these coaches you were talking about, or referees. You know, the makeup and everything goes on. Yes, that's something the woman, you know, puts on naturally. But how was she behaving with the men? She'd still be firm and strong and everything goes. But instead of trying to act like a man, with that aggression, that male aggression that she would then have, masculine aggression, she would then be operating in her female positive energy, and the men would be following the directions very quickly.
Yep.
And this is the whole thing, that if we can find that positive of both the masculine and feminine that's in each of us and really focus on that, and know that the downside, the negative masculine and feminine energy kicks in when we're not taking notice and when we're getting stressed.
I think it's society too, like the legal system lets us down quite a bit. Like you're talking about sex trade and rape and that. Like I was a policeman for 20 years, had a lot to do with people that have been victims of that sort of thing. And as society, we allow that to go on ridiculously. Like for me, I think they need to be shot. Like I'm very extreme like that. I think if you do the wrong thing by a woman or a kid, that kid's life emotionally and intimately is over. You know, so if you want to do that, fine, do it. But yeah, see you later. I don't want to see you. You know, none of this. They can be rehabilitated. Bullshit. They do that once, then they'll do it again. You know, and I think we can't not be victims if they're going to allow people to get off, because that just cements you as a victim. So I think we get let down a little bit by that side. Does that make sense? You know,
well, we've got children at school that we've got losing more and more children each year. I know that between the age of 11 and 15, over 5% of all girls in Australia will have tried to attempt suicide.
Well, sexual in Aboriginal communities, like out at Burke and that, the amount of kids that have been sexually assaulted by the age of 10 is over 97%.
Whoa.
That's more than 9 out of 10 kids. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know, and like for me, the only reason that it's present is because society allows it. If you knew that if I did this, I'd be dead, you'd think twice about doing it. You know, but if they say, oh, you know, if I get caught, like I saw one bloke got done for sexually penetrating his own grandson for the second time under 10, and he got 2 years weekend detention. Where's the deterrent? How can this kid not be a victim?
Yeah.
And that's setting them up then for the future to go through a lot as well. So we've got 7-year-olds now self-harming. But we're also, there's so many things that we're doing wrong. I know in WA, in Western Australia, in the schools, they're teaching the kids at a very early age to change their, change boys to wear girls' clothes and girls to wear boys' clothes and everything else. This is about being able to appreciate the differences between the sexes, the genders and everything else. But really at that age, all they're doing is creating greater confusion.
Yeah,
Those sort of things are ridiculous. There's a lot of stuff that we're doing that doesn't really follow the right format. We know if we step back from it and had a look and got past, I just want to get people to accept, like, for instance, those who are gender fluid. Well, accept them, but don't get confused the kids in the process where they don't know whether they are or not. And there's no question whether they are. So we've got to be careful of that, because we've got to step back and go, okay, as parents, as just human beings, are we putting stuff in front of these kids in their minds that causes greater problems than we had before, under the so-called excuse of trying to remove discrimination? We're actually creating bigger situations. But we've gone off track there. Evan, you were...
I'm right there with you, Alan, because
I thought, you're not getting away with it.
I'm thinking about creating a new political party called the Common Sense Party. And bringing back some common sense to the world here. So, in America, we got Republican and Democrat. I'm conservative on this. I'm like, how about just some common sense here? So, hey, the parts don't fit. Okay, yeah, that's probably not a good idea. Okay, yeah, just basic common sense. But yeah, again, it's as human beings, we learn how to live from somebody else, and somebody else has an agenda, and it's we allow it, right? I'll share one that's interesting, and then I think we can get some hope in here. But I served on a board. I have some friends it started in England and made its way over here, the Salvation Army, which was kind of like the first great nonprofit. But the founder of the Salvation Army, this is in the mid 1800s. He started it on this cause. He said, I want to eradicate child sexual slavery from England. That was what that's what Salvation Army was founded on. And this was in 1865. And it's like, wow. So I think the one benefit, this is like the biggest double-edged sword in the world, right? Because Jurgen, you were talking about, from 0 to 5, it's the parents. Well, nowadays you look around, kids got the little binky in and they got this in their hand. It keeps them quiet. Yeah. And so the parent thing's gone. But this double-edged sword, the positive side is now everybody knows about it, where before no one knew about it, right? So these guys in Burke and all the stuff that's going on, nobody knew about that stuff. Everything was on the down low. Oh, everything's hit. Oh, yeah. Now it's like everybody knows. So at least it's out there. And so now it's just about going back to a lot of things you were talking about, John, about taking action and saying, hey, we know it's out here. Now, what are we going to do about it? How are we gonna change this? How can we put this together? And I just real quick, because I wanted to hear from you guys of manhood and what that meant to you. So my journey, real quick, very similar to all of you guys, is I come from a normal dysfunctional family. So dad was gone at 4 or 5 years old, and so my male mentorship was James Bond. And so, unlike the Duke, he didn't hit the women, but he was the gentleman. He was chivalry. So, but it was like, oh, you got to have 5 women per movie because that's a real man, right? But at least you're nice to him, right? You're not hitting him. You're suave and you're cool, right? So it was James Bond and it was the NFL football. That was masculinity to me. And so I finally was able to explain to my bride. She's like, gosh, why do you enjoy football so much? I was like, I was 7 years old. That was my father figure. I'm watching football at 7 years old. Nowadays, that's normal. Back then, kids didn't watch sports. But I was crying out for male mentorship, but didn't know how to ask for it. So now I kind of came up with what healthy masculinity is to me. And, number one, that's someone who takes action. So Alan, you talked about it. Everybody can do this all day long, right? It's like, okay, what's really happening? And there's the classic quote, people hear it all the time in the faith-based world all the time. They say, well, God can't steer a parked car. And that's not true. He can turn the wheel any direction, but the car's still parked. It's not going anywhere. You got to step on the gas. You got to move the car and take action and go somewhere. And the second thing, and I love it, John, because you've been talking about it, and you and I are dialed in. It's all about integrity. And as interesting, you and I, John, can talk about integrity all day long, but you and I both are guilty of, I checked the box that says I read the terms and conditions on that app. Right? Let's talk about how integrous we are. Oh, yeah, I read that. Yep, skip. So, so integrity is a great mirror, but it really comes back to, okay, well, what is integrity and where did we learn it from? And what's cool for me is, and Jurgen and I will politely disagree, but it's cool just to get the different aspects. But I think there's just too much order in the world to be just these random things that were created. So I think we were creating God's image, and there's something inside us when we do something we know, like, hey, that's not right to, try to molest little kids. We know there's internal stuff that you can't quantify. There's no like body scan you can do. When you are out of integrity, you know it. Your cells know it. It's an internal thing. And I think the Creator put that there for us. But yeah, it's about taking action on that integrity and going, hey, my word's going to count for something. Yeah, I'm going to be there. And then the last thing for me about being a real man, and you talked about too, John, that's why I'm so with, is taking responsibility. And Jurgen and Alan, all you guys, it's taking responsibility. Going back to Jurgen, when you're talking about relationships, in order for things to change, right, I have to change. In order for things to grow, I have to grow. In order for things to get better, I have to get better. And so most people, again, aren't willing to do that. But I think the more people hear about it and realize, Alan, you're such a great story, right? It's like, gosh, here's a dude divorced 2 times. Wow, he's Yoda and he's still learning. What a great concept.
I got the ears and I look like Yoda.
I got the Yoda part from John, but lastly, I just want to end on my side, John. I'm with you 100% on the Judge Dredd style of just, hey, you know what? If you cross the line here, it's over. We can do public execution. We can do whatever. But I think we would purge society. We might be surprised at what's left. It's like, wait, where'd everybody else go?
I'm not saying that's the answer.
No, I'm with you. I'm just like, dude, let's just, take them out. Again, go back to Judge Dredd, right? Judge and jury guilty. Boom. We don't need, don't need to mess around.
Well, I think but there's also with the integrity and everything else and taking action, it really comes back to each of us. We need, if I teach people how to read somebody else, they first of all, to know how to communicate with that person, have to know themselves. So we need to understand ourselves first of all. Yes. Do that reality check, do that integrity check and everything else. Check our values out, what we feel is right and what's not right, and then start to treat other people in that way. As they say, they used to say, well, treat people as you would have them treat you. No, that's totally wrong. Treat them as that the way that they want to be treated. Mm-hmm. That's why when it comes to my profiling, what's that?
That's just respect.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. So if you understand the other person and you know their personality and they know this is the way they take information, that's, as we, when I was working with you, John, how we actually went through the profiling to understand somebody. Know yourself, change the way you like to be spoken to, the way they want to be spoken to. But with all that, that statement of treat other people as you would have them treat you was disrespectful because it wasn't really taking that into consideration. You weren't understanding them. It was all about us. We need to take that outside and start looking at the other people. And I think whether you've got positive masculine, feminine energy or the less positive or negative masculine or feminine energy, the end result will be that if you take that approach, you're always going to move towards the positive.
Yes.
Because for a man to be in both positive and masculine and feminine energy means he's got that, he stands up, he takes all that right, as you were saying there before, John, that taking that position. But he also then has that feminine side that understands and is more gentle and nurtures and everything else. So it's, and for most of us guys, nurturing is not our basic way of doing things. I found that out raising 3 boys. I found that particular skill that a woman has was something I had to struggle with to come anywhere near fair with it. So it's being able to do that, I think, is probably the best place to start. And it's up to each of us to do that instead of saying, hey, they should do this, they should do this over there. Do that.
Yeah, it's us. I'm studying history with my son and going back to the classic stuff that was so boring in school. Now it's really interesting. But looking at the Constitution and looking at the Declaration of Independence, how America was founded, but they founded it on we the people. Yeah. It wasn't you and them and him and this color and that gender. It was we the people. We the people. And so I think there's a lot of stuff that we can get back to. And then from a faith-based world, there's the classic, the Lord's Prayer, and just the 2 words really encompass everything you're talking about, Alan, which is our Father. And it's like not his or hers, it's everybody. It's we're all, there's only one race, the human race. And it's we and it's us. And it's again, instead of they should, it's what can we do? So I just appreciate you opening this up, Alan, for us to talk and connect and get different worldviews and different hair views and all of the above. Because this is action. This is literally taking action and connecting with people and having these conversations of, you know, hey, what does that look like? But we can all agree, hey, it's all about what can we do and what actions can we take?
Well, as I say, it takes a village to raise children, raise family. And it really, it's not the community that gives permission to the men. It's the community's got the responsibility of creating a safe place for men to give themselves permission to step up. That's what the Campfire was created on. So
yes.
Then, and as I say, if we follow this approach, we start to grow, we start to understand the energies we're talking about, the roles of fatherhood and all the rest of it. The greatest recipients of this are going to be our partners and our children. Because we change, and in that, they were observing us, so our kids are going to be completely different. As I say, if you want to raise a great kid, it starts 100 years before. So it's the generations that lead down, because that child's going to learn from the parents, the grandparents, and what they have is going to come from there. So we really, if we want to change society, we need to start with us, and we start to then need to take that down through the next lot of generations. So eventually with our great-grandkids, for instance, we'll see some major changes.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Anyway, thanks very much, guys, again for today.
Thank you.
As usual, Nat, we get into these conversations, time gets away, and I think we could keep talking about this again. So this subject, and like the other subjects, will be touched on over and over. So love the fact that you came into the group today. I'll love to see you in further panel discussions. You know, when this goes out, share it with the other people outside. Get them to come in and have a look. Because as I said, they're only going in here into the Campfire at the moment. Yep. The next thing there will be is interviewing the women, and then bringing the women into the panels as well. So we'll really start to get together, and we can show and prove that we can be respectful to each other, because as we've had these panels, each person who's come into the panel has been respectful of the other person's view, even when they haven't really agreed with it, except, you know, the age might be something that we'll have to talk about later, John. But if anybody wonders, and that John and I have known each other for a few years, and it's usually a lot of laughter when we get together. So again, guys, to Evan, to Jurgen, to John, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Gentlemen, it was an honor.
And
thank you.
to everybody who's listened in, thanks for being here, and we'll see you on the next interview or Campfire discussion or panel as well. Bye-bye for now.
Bye for now. Cheers.